you are here, let's get directly into it. So I want to by formally welcoming everyone back to this, our third session in what is the final part in our three-part series on governance of the state sector.
Yeah.
Now, last week we dealt with the issues of integrity and accountability of persons in public life. And I will tell you that Mr. Raymond could easily have fit into any of those sessions. However, he is very well known for his energy in getting transparency in procurement of goods and services in the state sector out in the open.
Yes.
And therefore, we invited him to share with us what are some of those concerns. You know, where are the troubling issues that may be as clear as daylight, but which no one touches?
Okay.
So we have invited Mr. Afra Raymond to share with us ensuring transparency in the procurement process. So I just want to read a very short profile, and it is a very short profile that he has given us before I invite him to take the floor. So Afra is a professional fellow of the RICS and a managing director of Raymond & Peer Limited. He contributes to the press and broadcast media in Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean. His special areas of interest include real estate, property development, land use planning, property taxation, property financing, and the 2009 bailout of the CL Financial Group. A lot of his work is available at afraraymond.net, and I want to invite all of you to check out his site, where you will see just how much energy he has really put into trying to bring a certain kind of society here in Trinidad and Tobago. He is a past president of the Institute of Surveyors of Trinidad and Tobago and a past president of the Joint Consultative Council for the Construction Industry, having served between December 2010 and November 2015. So I want to invite to the floor now someone who I know is going to really make us think through a lot of what we do. Because as I was sharing a little bit earlier, the legislation will only go so far. People are a major part of the process, and therefore, how do we ensure there's transparency in our procurement process? Over to you, Afra.
Okay, Kamla, thank you very much. And thanks to the Caribbean Corporate Governance Institute for hosting me once again. I appreciate these opportunities. Are you hearing me clearly, everybody? Yeah?
Yeah.
Right. What I wanted to start off by saying, because my topic is to do with transparency in the procurement process within this new law. I think I summarized that right, Kamla. And what I'd like to start off by saying is that what we have before us at this point in our development around these questions is that, and I'm going to say it straightforwardly, the Public Procurement Law, Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Property Act, remains unimplemented. It remains unproclaimed, and for reasons we don't know. And let me be very clear, this is a matter of the first order of concern. It will be very irresponsible, it will be remiss of me to plunge into a discussion about this detail or that detail without dealing with the fact that we don't have the law yet. And let me say a few things about that so colleagues could understand where I'm coming from. The law, the act is Act number 1 of 2015, and it was amended in 2016 with particular points to do with the tenure of the board, the creation of an appeal panel, and of course, the whole question about dealing in property and self-trading and so on. So important amendments are put on the table and passed into law under the current PNM administration. And the procurement board was appointed as the last act of President Kamona at the end of January 2018. They were appointed for 3-year terms of office. And a lot of work went into getting the organization ready to do this important work. So they had to hire staff, they had to get premises, they had to get stationery, and do a lot of boring backroom stuff to put the organization in a place. They also had to do external stuff, like training people in ministries and state agencies and so on, who were transacting in public money about what was the way to conform with the Act. Now, I could tell you that the Act is actually operated by what we call regulations. Those are handbooks, guidelines, and regulations. They all it does use the phrase regulations to refer to all of those detailed workbooks. The Act is operated by reference to regulations, and those regulations had to be agreed with the Minister of Finance. The Minister of Finance is the paymaster. The Minister of Finance is not the line minister as such, but within the way the Act was written, the Minister of Finance has to negotiate and settle those with the Procurement Regulation Office of Procurement Regulation. And I can tell you, all of that was done in January of this year. The actual regulations were finalized. The organization has been fully staffed. Everything is in place. And what needs to happen now is those regulations that were finalized after dialogue and correspondence with the procurement regulator need to be placed in Parliament by the Minister of Finance, which is Minister Colmimbert. And they're placed in Parliament for what is called negative resolution, which is a formality because it does not require a special majority. The same way the budget could have passed, I think it was yesterday or the day before, and the opposition UNC didn't vote for it, but the budget has been passed into law as a result of a parliamentary process. There are enough votes to pass the procurement regulations into law. The missing ingredient is that Minister Imbert has not put it into the Parliament's timetable, okay? And that is actually something that is a very great concern to all of us. Those of us who are concerned with good order and the whole question, which the Caribbean Corporate Governance Institute asked me to speak on this afternoon, which is the question of transparency in the procurement process. So a little after January, we had Carnival, and we had the Minister of Health and Dr. Rowley and other of the country's political leaders making the point to us about COVID. It was a matter of global significance, unprecedented. And we went into a sort of almost a crisis lockdown sort of mode, during which the Prime Minister appointed a road to recovery team. I think the road to recovery team was about 22 or 23 people. There was some discussion about who was on the committee and who wasn't on the committee. So there was a team appointed by Dr. Rowley to advise on what should be the country's road to recovery coming out of COVID. And at page 52 of that team's report, they actually say very clearly that immediate proclamation of procurement law is essential. It is one of two proposals I made to the recovery team. I look at the PNM manifesto, and Kamala, you have the extract. I sent it to you earlier today, a couple of hours ago. The PNM manifesto at page 18, it says very clearly that after considerable dialogue with the regulator, the regulations necessary to operationalize the Act have been finalized and will be enacted early in our next term. So we're sitting here at the end of October. The election was on the 10th of August, and the election was 10 weeks ago. Every week, the Parliament meets once or twice. They're on TV, they're on the radio, they're in the newspapers, they're having fun with each other, motor car allowances, and calling each other names and who's a racist and all kinds of schoolyard chat. And our country has a limited opportunity to put in place a proper set of arrangements, modern, flexible arrangements for the management of how we transact in public money. How do we dispose of public property in a scenario where we're supposed to get rid of all of those gas stations? You remember that was announced in the budget? We're supposed to be looking at finalizing the Petrotrin transaction with OWTU. I think it's called Patriotic Energy, yeah? The OWTU company. We have big things happening, not to mention the increase in public-private partnership, which Minister Imbert mentioned in the budget on the 5th of October. We have big things happening. And without the necessary safeguards that the procurement law gives us, without the necessary safeguards that have been agreed by the minister, according to the PNM's own manifesto, page 18, we are actually gambling with our future. We already understand that the way public money is handled in the country is highly unsatisfactory and many times in breach of the law. We don't have that amount of money we had in the past to play the fool and to make mistakes. We simply have to get it right. And if we spend $1 million on something, whether it's tires for the police vehicles or hampers for needy people, we have to get $1 million worth of tires. We can't afford to be wasting this quantity of public money. So in fact, that is the first question I want to put here as a commitment of being transparent and us having a serious discussion that in fact, we need to lobby. I myself will continue, I've been doing it. I would ask the Caribbean Corporate Governance Institute. I would ask the Trinidad and Tobago Transparency Institute. I would ask JCC if they can. And I would ask those of you who belong to organizations, whether they are Rotary clubs, whether they are churches, whether you belong to your own professional organizations, ICAT or whatever, that have an affiliation with the cause of management and governance and public money, that we need to make a concerted call to do the right thing for once. Let us overcome this affliction that Trinidad and Tobago has, where we are brilliant and we can think of all kinds of things, but we have a tremendous problem implementing. We devised this law. It's a very good quality law. Let's implement it. Let's do the right thing for once. Future generations will look back on us and thank us for this. So that's my opening statement. I'd pause there for now, and then I could come back a bit further statements on the theme of transparency and the procurement system. I'd pause there for now, and let's have a little bit of an exchange with each other's colleagues. How many people are in the meeting, Kamala?
At the moment, we have 59 persons in the room.
Okay. It's a big room.
Yes, a very full room.
Nice, nice.
So persons would have been more familiar with this morning, the presentation, and then the question and then answer. So I'll give them an opportunity to
just pause here, yeah.
But
sure.
I want to ask you, Afra, just a very open and a provocative question. But first, we have to decide, do we really want to change as a country? Do we want to, or do we just want to talk it? Because that's a possibility, yeah? When we had the session last week, Dr. Terence Farrell made a very open and blunt statement when he said that the way things are in the public sector, it's because that's the way we want it to be, or somebody wants it to be. So if we want to change, then we have to really take that very open conversation in first exploring, do we want to have a different society, or are we okay with being corrupt?
Okay, let me, that question is a very huge question. I find myself unable to avoid it. It is tantalizing. Let me answer you in two different ways, Kamala. First of all, I think the unstable and disorganized arrangements actually allow a lot of other stuff, a lot of stupidness to take place. Not all of it is corruption in the financial sense, but stupidness, whether it's coming to work late, leaving early, all kind of things. The other thing I would observe is the way in which it is possible, if you have political weight on your side, to get something approved. It's remarkable to me when you do the backstory on some of the really corrupt things in the country, how swiftly, how smoothly something that was just bent was agreed at the highest level. And I'm speaking about the cabinet here, at the highest level. And people will say to you with a straight face, cabinet approved that. And it's specific what they're talking about. This thing you're questioning, cabinet approved that. And it is amazing to me, in a situation where you could be trying to do something normal, you could be trying to get a lease for your recreation ground in your community. And you could be knocking dog, as we say in Trinidad, no disrespect to dogs. You could be knocking dog for years and months between this ministry and that committee and Town and Country and WASA thing, and to get that lease for your recreation ground. Nobody's making money just to get a lease. For the children and the teenagers here to play cricket and little for small goal and thing. And to get a normal thing, you have to go through a whole set of tiers to get that. And then somebody will get something that's wrong. And the two examples I would give the example, as I always say, the CL financial bailout, where in fact they wrote a letter on the 13th of January, 2009. And by the 30th of January, the entire cabinet of Trinidad and Tobago, and I'm going to say this, it did include Mariano Brown, even if he wasn't in the meeting. He remained in the cabinet. The entire cabinet of Trinidad and Tobago, because that's how cabinet decisions are taken. It's called collective responsibility. The entire cabinet had agreed to a blank check. That's the ultimate one. It wasn't even a check for $1 billion, a blank check with no interest, pay back whenever you like. That's what we agreed on the 30th of January 2009, in 17 days flat. Okay. I've interviewed both Mrs. Nunez Scherer and Mr. Mariano Brown on this. This is a serious thing. So the point I'm making is that certain things are able to get an accelerated beneficial treatment, super efficient. Second example, it took place a year ago. So we're not reaching back 11 years into the midst of time. A year ago, there was that huge contract with the Chinese contractor to build 439 new homes for the HDC. I think it was China Gizbu General Contracting, CGGC was the name of the Chinese company, a state-owned Chinese construction company, engineering and construction. That contract was signed by the Ministry of Works, Minister of Housing, approved by cabinet. And when the HDC released the details of the contract in response to the JCC's Freedom of Information request, a number of us, myself, Anthony Wilson from the Express, JCC themselves, a number of us took up a strong criticism of the contract, the terms and conditions. At which point, the next time there was a post-cabinet briefing, we were told that the contract was cancelled. And that in fact, the whole question of cabinet approval, did cabinet approve it to the AG's advice? There was a session in Parliament, it's kind of hilarious if you find these things funny, in which a number of the UNC people were trying to question Minister of Finance Imbut at the time on the question of, did Faris Arawi give his office, the office of the AG, did they give an answer in relation to the question of, did he give advice? Did he give advice in relation to the legality of that contract, the propriety of that contract? So we have a contract, it's like Alice in Wonderland. 3 characteristics. Number 1, it was approved super fast. The whole thing was approved in about 2 months. A huge contract, huge. Number 2, it was a good contract because the Minister of Housing signed it. So it must have been a sound contract. And then a week later, it wasn't sound. So it was 3 things at once. It was efficient, it was good, and then it wasn't good. All in the space of 2 months. And there are plenty of examples. I could sit down here and talk for a week about it. So we have this phenomenon, Kamala, where on the one hand, we have an inefficient system. We all know there's an inefficient system. We know if we have something to do here or there, most times you would call up a friend and say, you know anybody in there? Wait, now you didn't have a cousin working down so, and we all know it, to get things done, whether it's licensing or the passport office or whatever. We all know that. Some offices have improved a lot. Okay, I had a passport office experience earlier this year. It was really good. Some offices, I'm not going to pretend that everything is always broken. Things have improved. But that degree of instability and that degree of confusion, I believe it's manufactured to allow room for stupidness, and it's maintained to allow room for stupidness. One of the good things, I don't want to sound morbid, but one of the good things which may come out of this crisis, you know, every cloud has a silver lining, and nearly giggled at something somebody said just now. but it's on the track, so I can't yet. One of the good things in Trinidad and Tobago is that, in fact, every cloud has a silver lining. And one of the good things that may come out of this COVID scenario is that, in fact, some of our things, some of our problems regarded as intractable, people may have to change. And some of the kind of bastions in the public service may have to change, including in the private sector. We're already seeing some of the strains developing in the private sector. We get in cries on the restaurant and the bar sector and so on. So the stasis is not just in the state. The stasis also exists in the private sector. So we're going to see change. It's happening already. I mean, our business, we have changed a lot in the last 3-4 months because of this crisis, you know? So I'll pause there for now. Kamala, is that any way towards answering what you're saying?
Well, one of the things that you shared that I thought was very heartening was that there has been change and there has been improvement in some areas of the public service.
I would say so, yeah.
Yes, that sends the message to us, therefore, that no, we don't all want that, things to continue to be in a mess. So therefore, let's extrapolate from that. The majority of persons who are in the room here with you, Afra, are procurement specialists.
Sure.
Many of whom work in the public sector here in Trinidad and Tobago. We do have persons outside as well, including we have Andre Bennett, who shared with us early this morning from
Jamaica. He was here. He was real good last time. He was good.
Yes, he was excellent this morning as well.
Excellent, yeah, good.
Yes. All right, so we do. Yeah.
Let me just say one tiny point about that public sector thing. Sometimes when I speak, it may appear that I am overtly hostile or overly suspicious about the public sector, or that some of my remarks contain some kind of bad intention towards the public sector. And let me just say, as a background information about myself, my entire family, the generation before me, were all public servants. My mother, my uncles, all of them. My aunts, all of them. Okay. Head of department here, my mother was a head of department, 2 uncles were heads of department. I myself was a public servant for years when I lived and worked in England as a surveyor. So I have no hostility to public servants or public officials, if you prefer that phrase, than servant, or public institutions for that matter. I actually know, it's not just me being political or being cute, I actually know that they have a substantial amount of good people, conscientious people, educated people working in the public service. I understand that those people are trying their best. But the point Kamala was getting at, and I think she's very, very much on the right track, was that in fact, maybe this set of disarranged and discontinuous and confused things could be something that suits certain people. Okay? And I think that I think you could be on the right track, Kamala. Mm-hmm. Let me give a little example. We have a situation in Trinidad and Tobago where, because of a transparency example and relating to the public service, where in fact we have developed a procedure within the Defense Force, which is Regiment, Coast Guard, Air Guard, and within the police service, I don't know if it's the fire service as well, but certainly with the Defense Force and the police service, that people who have been selected for training, their newspaper, their picture goes in the paper. Let's say 150 people were selected for training. They put their picture in the paper and they ask anybody who has information about that person to come forward. So they actually have what in procurement we call a standstill period. So they have an intention to give this person an opportunity to train as a regiment soldier, but they're giving the public an opportunity to comment before the person is taken informally to training, which is the parallel procedure in procurement, is a standstill procedure, a standstill period. And I asked myself the question, why can't the same thing apply to people who apply for HTC houses? Because one of the rules of applying for an HTC house, you're not supposed to have any other property. Or people who are about to be appointed as judges. I'm not just shooting at the poor man in the crowd, the HTC man. Why is it that the first time we hear somebody's a judge is when you open your Express or your Guardian in the morning or your Newsday, and you see that President Paul maybe swore in this person, this person, and this person as judges. Why is that a surprise? Why are we the last ones to know? It can't be a good marriage if the husband is the last one to know, or the wife for that matter. Okay? It's our country. Those judges and those police officers, regardless of the high level of their position, like Excellency Paul Weeks or the person sweeping the street in Woodford Square, those people are all public servants. Unless you're appointing somebody as a secret agent, which is a different thing, because we like it's a spy movie. But if you're really appointing somebody to be a judge in the High Court or a magistrate, why should we be the last ones to know? At that point, you probably have a whole set of difficulties to go through to have somebody like that removed, because there are different things in the Constitution and rules about how you remove those people and so on. So I'm just putting those thoughts out there in terms of what is, yeah?
Yes. Okay.
So I'll pause here.
Question. We have a question.
Yes.
First from K. Baldev Singh Arjun.
Yes.
We have Sandra Rosende, who has her hand up. So Sandra, I'll come to you in a second. Let me just first read Kay's question, which she sent to me, and she said, oh, that was a question to me for the CCGI. So I will respond to Kay with respect to that. But Sandra, let me invite you to make your comment or ask your question. You could just unmute yourself. And
hello, Sandra.
So Sandra, unless your hand went up by accident, because I'm not seeing you unmuted. So let's just ask the persons who work in the public sector now, how many of them feel that they would like to see this new law proclaimed? Or do they have concerns that they think need to be addressed before it becomes law? Does anyone have any question, any concern relating to that? Or would you all be willing to join the lobbying effort to call for proclamation of the law? Okay, so we have a very quiet crowd here today, Afra. Because I guess
it's almost unconstitutional. Is there such a thing as a quiet crowd? All right. Well, the next, I'm going to the question I would just repeat for colleagues is whether you have any comments or contributions to make my opening remarks. If not, I'll just go into my points about the transparency in the procurement process. The three points I want to make about transparency in the procurement process.
1 second, let me just ask.
Sure. I'll pause.
Inez Sinanan has unmuted her mic. Inez, did you have a question or comment you wanted to make?
Yes, I do. Hi, Afra.
Inez, I-N-E-Z.
That's right.
I remember, you see? How are you?
Very good. I've heard your introduction, and I totally agree with quite a lot of the things that you have said.
Thank you.
But there must be a reason. I don't want to qualify it good, bad, or otherwise.
Okay, obviously there must be a reason.
Why we have these laws on the books, and while we have them there, they are on the shelf.
Yes.
So in pushing this Procurement Act and awaiting the regulations, there must be a reason. There must be a reason for that gap.
Yes.
Is it because perhaps our administration has something else that they want to bring forward before there is assent to this act, and therefore they could continue along the route that they've been going? I think as a taxpayer, one, and as we own all those state-owned properties and so, case in point, that whole matter with national gas.
Yes, the gas stations.
It's not going to be an easy one. It is not. There are many people whose bread will be on the line. So there must be a reason for these delays. There must be. We don't know. It's not known to us, but I think it is something that activists should be pushing. Thank you.
Yes. Well, I want to say that, Inez, if I could respond, I want to say that, in fact, I thank you for the support, and there must be a reason for the reluctance or the failure to proclaim the law and to put it fully into place up to now. We don't know what that is. I don't like to speculate what it is. What I would say is that what we have at the moment is a situation where you have funded Procurement Regulation Office, Office of Procurement Regulation. That office is funded, it is staffed, there's a rent.
3 years.
Yep, there's a rent. And I think enough is enough, and the time for action is now. I don't think we can we can sit around on this one. This is a very serious moment. You see, it's interesting, eh? Let me take a step in a slightly different direction.
Let me just share, Afro.
Of course, Kamala, you go ahead.
Munilal Alchan is in the room with us.
I saw his name come up on anything just now, and I smiled. Yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
Sure, man, Munilal, welcome. And what I wanted to say is that there's a Shakespeare has this phrase he uses, how there's a tide in the affairs of men. And if you take, basically Shakespeare said, if you take the tide and you catch the wave, you can have a long, beautiful ride. And if you miss the tide, you can spend all your time flapping about and wondering how come you miss things. And I want to give an example without meaning to be too, and I'm not a person who's excessively party political, but I'll make the example about the tide in the affairs of men. There was a lot of complaint after the August the 10th election from various quarters about things about how the result was declared, how the votes were counted, people who were supposedly stranded overseas. You all would have heard all of those things. It was widely reported in the press. A lot of strong criticism was ventilated. We have a free press, and so it was ventilated online and so on and so on. And what I said to those people in certain forum that I belong to, I'm talking up to the point about tides and the affairs of men. I said we've had 3 opportunities since independence. 3. Since 1976 to change our constitution. We had 86 when we had 33-3. Okay. We had a situation when Mr. Manning was talking about the constitution for some time, and the whole question about executive presidency was being talked about. I think he would say that was in the early 2000s. Yeah, Mr. Manning it was discussed. Okay, he wanted to move his office to the Red House, and it was a national discussion. He didn't have enough votes, and it was discussed and so on. And then you had Mrs. Prasad Bisesa, who won the election in 2010 with 29 seats out of 41. Now, 29 seats out of 41, any way you want to slice the apple, that's a constitutional majority. Anything that they wanted to propose, they could have proposed. They could have put it out for us to discuss. I'm neither PNM or UNC. Reasonable people would have discussed it, criticized it, found fault, suggested things and so on. Whether it was to change the police commissioner thing or to change the way that judges, nothing was put forward. 5 years and 3 months with 29 seats in hand, and the way the politics in the country is balanced, one wonders, and I'm not being rhetorical, one wonders, when are we going to see that again? That kind of majority with 29 seats. For all of this self-satisfaction of the PNM people and so on and so on. They don't have a constitutional majority. Mrs. Prasad Bisesa had a rare victory in her hands. She had a rare opportunity for change. And I would say a responsibility for change. And I am saying to colleagues who are here to come back into the procurement discussion. I made an example, a national example, to come back into the procurement discussion. I'm saying to colleagues who are in this conversation with me that in fact, we have a responsibility, we have a duty. At this juncture, speaking as one of the people who was part of the team that put together the law, Trinidad and Tobago did a unique thing. I don't subscribe to Afro-pessimism and how here's that is and here's not anything bad. Here's people like me, here's people like Kamla, here's people like Munilal, here's marvelous people. Here are people like we. Here we are the people who took the responsibility. Nobody outside of Trinidad and Tobago told us that you have to bring this law now. We took the responsibility in civil society, the professional bodies to write that law. I was part of the team with my colleagues. Years and years of work, sleepless nights, paid lawyers to write the law, and gave a complete law to the partnership in December of 2010, a complete law. The law that's there now is 95% of what we wrote. And we need to finish the job. We should not look back in regret 10 years from now, 15 years from now. If you think things are in a mess now, just wait. You don't have to put any law, you don't put any controls, wait and see where we will go. Wait and see where we'll go. We have an opportunity, if not a responsibility, to take grasp of the situation and insist that the correcting is done. That's what I'm trying to say to colleagues here. So I use the political example, not in an attempt to score cheap political points, but to make the point that you could be in the middle of an opportunity. And the partnership was very busy. They were busy doing this and that, but they never did anything constitutional. There was no structural change proposed, nothing. Now that they've lost the 2020 election, you get a lot of talk about this should be that. You all were there. What did you do? And I don't want my children and my grandchildren saying to me, well, you were there, Papa, what did you do? We have to do something. We have to stand for something. So that's what I leave colleagues with as my response to that. I see some colleagues making some very interesting points here. And you see, Alicia Hackshaw. Yes. Right. Pauline Stout and Montaigne here. Exceptionally bright. Yeah, my hashtag for them is hashtag bright for spite. That's my hashtag for them. Or for us. Not them, because I'm a Trinidadian too. For us, yeah? Now, the point is to answer your question, Kamla, because you asked me to speculate or you asked me to talk about what could be the reason. And the reality is that President Carmona swore in that board, as I said in my opening remarks, at the end of January of 2018. That board was sworn in for a 3-year term of office. And what that therefore means, logically, is that the procurement board, their terms of office run out at the end of January 2021. I don't believe, Mr. Munilal Lalchan is here, he could correct me if I'm wrong. He has the authority, and I'm sure colleagues here are attorneys and correct me. I don't believe the procurement regulator, that position is affected by a 3-year rule. I believe the other positions are 3-year rules, are 3-year terms of office. So what we could see, and in fact what we're likely to see, the way things play in this town, is that we could see at the end of January that the current board is bid farewell. And so there's some staggering. That's good. Thank you, Munilal. So we could see, right. I knew you were longer. We could see some kind of staggering in terms of appointments of people. I would hate to think that the Minister of Finance is delaying this important development in our country. Even the struggle that we're involved in, this is part of development. Not every development is physical. Sometimes the development is moral or ethical or intellectual. This is part of the country's development. And if we get this right, we will get so much else right. We have to stand up for what's right. So I would like to go into some procurement related points now, apart from the whole lobbying for the law thing, unless somebody has any other points they want to add. Sandra, I see your name popping up again. Sandra, are you speaking?
It's Kamla. So I wanted to ask.
Okay, yes.
To go directly where you just said you were going to, which is
yes,
that.
I will, yes.
Understood it at the high level with the politicians, but because of your experience,
yes,
you will know of some of the things that would appear to be happening behind the scenes. So therefore, what are some of those transparency issues that you feel that the procurement practitioners themselves need to address? What can they change to change some of what goes
Sure. One of the two big things I would mention straight away that are included in the Act, and they are very important measures provisions to deal with transparency is one of them is the whole question about phantom projects. Because a phantom project, it may sound like I'm making a joke, but a phantom project is a reality in this country. So you can have a project that in fact nobody has ever mentioned. A project nobody ever gave a speech about. A project that nobody proposed. A project that's not in a budget. And bam, a morning, somebody is turning this sword and opening the project. Or an advertisement appears to advertise for a project and they want you to put a tender in 6 weeks' time for some huge thing. I'll give 2 examples of that. I like to back it with examples. That always makes it solid. The first example is the wretched Beta Motor Recycling Project, which of course appeared on the scene in 2013 as a project that was tendered, coming out of NGC and so on and so forth. With WASA and SIS got the contract and so on and so on. But I'm not really on the SIS page of the story now or about the cost of the project or anything. The point I'm making, and I analyze it very carefully in my blog, is that Minister of Hawaii was the new Minister of Finance, and he said Minister of Hawaii. Minister of Finance, Larry Hawaii. You see, those Freudian slips. Minister of Finance, Larry Hawaii, when he gave his budget speech, I think it was his inaugural budget speech in the year 2012, he spoke at length about water. Minister Hawaii told us how the water supply was good, but it needed augmenting in terms of water treatment. He listed 5 water treatment stations that was already building that year. He knew the cost of them and the neighborhoods and things. Really nice report to the parliament, and WASA was doing well and so on. As my mother would say, not a mention of BTM, NGC, WASA, nothing. And then all of a sudden, bam, we get this project. Where was it? So the biggest project in WASA's portfolio, which turned out to be $1 billion something, was invisible. So that's what a phantom project is. So how could something so big be invisible? Which is why the procurement law contains provisions about, in fact, projects have to be listed from the year before. So you really can't have any kind of surprise projects. Because what a surprise, and the second example I will give you all, because I said I would give 2. The second surprise example I'll give you all is UWDB. So UWDB is the controversial campus down in Debe, which is Prasad Bisesa's constituency. And it was built on 100 acres of land, formerly Karanese land. And it was built by the university. And we, when I was president of JCC, we took up a very strong action against it. We went to see Professor Sankat. He was the head of the university at the time, Clement Sankat. He's now in, I think he's in Panama, or Belize or somewhere. And what we discovered when we went to see Professor Sankat, to our astonishment, he was claiming, we went to see him in May of 2012. Professor Sankat was claiming, because we were saying, but where is this project? It's nowhere. UWI has strategic documents. UWI has a 5-year plan. UWI has consultations. Faculties talk with each other. It was supposed to be the law faculty. Nobody has heard about this. So you can imagine that. They were building a whole new university that nobody had heard about. And Professor Sankat referred us in an attempt to defend his position to UWI's strategic plan for 2010 to 2015. And it is nowhere, UWDB, of UWI south of the county, it's nowhere in the plan. Okay, so that's another huge phantom project. It's now finished. There's no law school there, once again. It's supposed to be literature and something. They're using it for COVID patients. And I don't know, we spent $700 million to do that. Why? Okay, so it's a real and pressing concern, the phantom project. Therefore, those provisions in the Act, which I just mentioned, where you have to list the projects from 12 months before, are very important to give contractors and people who want to compete for the projects proper notice that, okay, this is coming up. Because linked to that, which takes me to the next point, is the question that apart from out and out dishonest behavior in terms of things that can get you locked up. Okay? There's also another type of dishonest behavior. And there are different levels of dishonesty. All of us are adults, we know that. There's some dishonesty that get you in prison, and there's some dishonesty that could get somebody to stop liking you. And the reality is that the point I'm getting at here is about how we have the habit of starting projects, announcing projects, issuing tenders, inviting tenders for projects that are unfunded. Now, in fact, unfunded projects that actually don't have enough money to be built, is actually one of the hugest contributors to the cost and the delay with public projects. Not every time there's a cost overrun or a delay, it's because a contractor is crooked or some politician took the money, or it isn't always like that. Many times, what happens is that successive governments have this problem. You announce this and you announce that and you open the other and you have a pilot project for this and you're building 3 of these. But in fact, you don't have money for all of them. What happens as a result? You enter into commitments, which to use a financial euphemism, they're unfunded commitments. Okay? And those commitments are supposed to be right. Yes, I'll come to that just now. Those commitments are supposed to be funded if they're to be properly delivered. If you have an unfunded commitment, you have a contractor who might have gotten a mobilization payment, started on site, and by the time they put 2 monthly certificates in, your ministry's budget or your state agency's budget is used up. And there's any excuses start, and the stories start. And then we come through to another part of the story, because you have to walk through to understand this thing. And the other part of the story is this. The large state agencies, again, colleagues are here. I don't know which agencies you all represent. You were speaking, I'm just seeing names here. You would correct me if I'm wrong. The large state agencies that deal with construction, whether it is NIDCO, HDC, UDCOT, WASA, those sorts of millions and hundreds of millions of projects. Those sorts of agencies, typically, they create contracts and they modify the FIDIC contract to delete the clauses that give you interest in the case of late payment. I have many, many friends and colleagues who are contractors. I see the contracts. They've been amended. They say, delete this, delete that. They don't want to pay any interest. So from the time you divorce the relationship between time and money, you have a dysfunctional relationship, because time and money have to relate for the whole thing to make sense. So a state agency is owing me $20 million. They can pay me tomorrow morning, or they pay me in 18 years' time. Those 2 things are 2 different figures, even though each check will have $20 million written on it. And when a group of contractors or consultants knows they're going to be paid late, and they know they're going to not be able to get any interest, you pile up your prices, which defeats the underlying mission of value for money. That is the importance of having these transparency provisions in the Act. Transparency provisions to prevent phantom projects, to prevent unfunded projects. And I would like to say, this is part of our ongoing conversation. Munila and I have this ongoing conversation. I'm putting it out here. I would like to say the amendment of the FIDIC contract to delete the payment of interest for late payment of funds is in fact detrimental to accomplishment of the overarching goal of value for money in public projects. I'll leave it there for now. Those are my a few points. People wanted points, yeah.
All right, so I just want to ask the questions out loud from, okay, so we have 3 of them now. We'll start with Camille. And she says, how can a procurement specialist unmask corruption or even phantom projects and live?
Okay.
That's a question in Trinidad and Tobago.
Let me just ask this, let me answer this point. The question about phantom projects is really a provision that is dealt with in the Act, because the only as for my reading of the Act, is that the only projects which are legitimate projects that conform to the law are ones that were listed from a year before. A project can't just come along, like how I listed the Beta Water project or the Juvi Debe that was never mentioned before, and then all of a sudden everybody was doing this thing. That can't happen again. The corruption question you're asking was followed closely, Camille, by the question about the whistleblowing avenue, and the answer is yes, there are whistleblowing avenues within the procurement law. Without getting into all the section this and section that, yes, there are whistleblowing provisions, and they are quite strong within the procurement law. So I would leave it at that for now.
Right, so then we have a comment from Alicia Hackshaw. It's crazy that there are so many agencies and layers of oversight to prevent these things, but still. And therefore that comes to people's behavior. Yes. And what is our culture of what is acceptable and what we think is the right thing to do. Okay, and then we have a question from Alec Babwa. And he says, is there going to be a procurement process oversight? Is there going to be procurement process oversight by the Office of the Procurement Regulator for high risk, high value contracts in the state sector? Or is the power vested in the particular boards? Will audit to ensure processes are being followed to ensure lawful public procurement?
I am going to make bold, Monilal. I hope I don't step on your toes by saying the answer to both of those things is yes. Because the first thing that I may not use, I'm sorry?
I think this person unmuted by mistake.
Okay.
Unmuted by mistake.
No problem. The question about whether there's a procurement process oversight, the answer is yes, there is oversight. But let us be clear, just to repeat something that ought to be clear to everybody by now, let us be clear, the Office of Procurement Regulation is not procuring. They don't grant contracts. They are overseeing the procurement process of the various agencies and ministries that transact in public money and dispose of public property. And they're overseeing those actions of granting a contract, taking away a contract, varying a contract, all of that, yes? They're overseeing those actions to ensure conformity with the law, the Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Property Act, and conformity with good professional practice and the regulations and the guidelines and the handbooks and so on. So so just to clarify, Mr. Babwa, yes, there is going to be process oversight. The second thing about whether an audit will be done to ensure processes are being followed, to ensure lawful public procurement. I don't know if I put it as strong as audit. Audit is actually, in my mind, quite a rigorous and a detailed process of oversight. I wouldn't put it as strong as audit. I certainly say there will be oversight. And if indeed there's a whistleblower report, that is when a formal investigation will be launched into a particular case, yes? So that I hope that is assisting in some way. Munira, is that okay?
We can ask.
Okay, thanks, Munira. Thank you.
If he wants to actually unmute and clarify for us so that Alec, and we do have quite a few of the procurement specialists in the class here, can get an answer to that.
Yes.
Lantrell, can we ask you to unmute and just speak for it a little bit?
Yeah, yes, Kamla, once you don't want to see me.
No, it's okay, it's okay.
Actually, under section 13(1)(n), it says to investigate on our own initiative or upon complaint from any party involved in public procurement or disposal of public property or any member of the public, any alleged or suspected breach of the act. Alleged or suspected.
Yes.
And it also gives us wide-ranging audit powers to audit to ensure compliance with the act. So both are covered in the act and it's in law.
Thanks, Monica.
Okay, so then we come back, Afra, to this question of what are the things that you would like to see procurement specialists do differently as part of the steps in the process to prevent the kind of contracts that we see going out from the state sector?
Well, do differently is a little bit of a tantalizing one, because as it is, we have some of the state agencies have had procurement offices and so on, but it hasn't been a widespread thing. Okay, contracts have been awarded by boards, and contracts have been awarded by CEOs and that kind of thing. We are all aware of that. Okay, under various political administration, that is almost immaterial. The main thing that I would like to see happen differently from what has happened in the past, and in this case, I will give another example. This one is the last two examples were under the People's Partnership. This one is a P&M example for those of you who value balance and fair play. But I will give an example in this case, where in fact what you have is you have a board of well-educated and conscientious people appointed in a large state enterprise. They are charged with running a number of complicated affairs. And one of those sets of decisions which is in their hands is investment decisions about which projects to fund and so on. And we had an example, it was painful for me to read it, with the company we call E-Tech. E-Tech is one of the huge state enterprises. The chairman at the time, I believe, was Professor Ken Julian. So it's a very high profile type of company, okay? And the people in the board were high profile people. It wasn't a board of political hacks or anything. They were all accomplished people who had their degrees and qualifications and so on. And E-Tech, because one of the things I study is the state-owned hotels. E-Tech was under examination. They were being examined by a parliamentary committee under the chairmanship of David Small, who was an independent senator at the time. David is an energy specialist and he's a financially literate guy. And David Small made the point in his discussion, in his questioning, because they have a transcript in the Joint Select Committee report. They have transcripts of what was said. David Small is speaking with the fellow who is CEO of E-Tech. They call him the president of E-Tech. And they were asking him, well, why did E-Tech agree to spend all this money at Hilton? We're talking about Hilton in Trinidad, they want to buy the Savannah. That project was supposed to cost about, I think it's about $644 million. At the time they were questioning E-Tech, it was 2016. The project had gone on for 8 years. It started back in 2008 when Mr. Manning was Prime Minister, Professor Julian was there and so on, okay? And I think they had a thing with the Summit of the Americas and the Commonwealth heads of government. They were trying to get the hotel ready for some big things to take place in the country. And Trinidad and Tobago government undertook contracts to the tune of 600 and something million. At that point in time, $508 million had been spent. And the head of E-Tech was unable to tell the parliamentary committee when it was going to finish. Let's tell you how ridiculous it is, what is happening in our country. What is more, David Small pressed him, and David Small said, well, I don't understand this. I tried to do a discounted cash flow, which is an analysis of whether the project makes any sense. I tried to prepare a discounted cash flow on the money we are spending on this thing and our return. And I keep getting a negative rate of return. This makes no sense. Why did we do this? Did you perform a financial analysis? How did you make this decision? He kept pressing him. And eventually, the president of E-Tech had to admit, this is under oath, in the transcript in the Hansard. He said, well, I can't tell you anything, except cabinet instructed us to do the project. So there you had a highly competent board, led by no less than Professor Ken Julian, Wendy Fitzwilliam, this wonderful, famous people on the board, educated people. And basically, cabinet sent a note to them and said, do this. And they went and they did it. And hopefully, procurement officers, because I'm addressing procurement officers in this response. Hopefully, procurement officers will be mindful of the fact that under this new law, every single penalty is custodial. There's no penalty where a state enterprise could write a check to the Office of Procurement Regulator, and that's the end of the matter, or to the court. Every single penalty is custodial, which to me is a measure of how serious, and correctly so, our legislature took these questions of high importance, the protection of the public purse and the protection of good order. Which means, in terms of what it means, because Kamala asked me, what would I tell the procurement officers to do differently to prevent these wrong things happening? The main link we were thinking about breaking when we wrote this thing in this way. We want to break that situation where cabinet, which doesn't sign any contracts, and cabinet is not on the line for anything, where cabinet could instruct by a cabinet note or a permanent secretary or a minister's phone call, could instruct a state enterprise or state agency to do so and so, or not to do so and so, effectively to enter a contract or to terminate a contract, and effectively to transact in public money. So you have political authority, but no legal responsibility. And we wanted to end that divorce. We talked about the divorce earlier on between time and money. We want to end the divorce between political authority and legal responsibility. It has to be a marriage. It has to be a marriage. So the person who has the financial responsibility in terms of saying, we're going to do this contract, that person has to have the legal responsibility too. And that is the thinking that has to inform our conduct under this act. Munilal, is that?
Yeah, and I saw that Inez Sinanan had unmuted her mic earlier. So
Inez?
if she had a question, she can in fact unmute, right? And go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kamala. I'm taking Afra back to the pilot versus phantom versus vanity projects. There are differences, and I don't know whether there are thresholds and whether or not all of them are going to be under the umbrella of the new Procurement Act. That's one. Two, what is the funding mechanism? Is the funding mechanism going to come again out of a budget from taxpayers?
For the regulator or for the projects?
For the projects. My understanding is that the year prior, companies are expected to send for the next year, the ensuing year, all the projects, all without a threshold, saying, well, 500,000 over $1 million. They're supposed to send all of them, and they are expected to give quarterly reports. So I wanted to find out what is the difference between those projects, the pilot, the phantom, and the vanity projects that I've heard bantered about.
All right. Well, Inez, I can tell you straight off that I'm the wrong person to ask that. I mean, I am sure that Mariana Brown, are you still there, Mariana? I'm sure that Mariana Brown would have been able to tell us all about those three pilot.
I missed that. I missed asking him.
Yeah, you must ask him when you see him, when you bring him back on these things, you must ask him, pilot, phantom, and vanity. He has been in that place. I've never been in that place, so I wouldn't know. The question of funding the projects, the funding has to be identified, or this there has to be some kind of certification that the funding is in place for the project. And I think that's really important, and a really important thing to be put in, and we got to keep it in. Okay, that's important. I don't know if I could say more than that, Inez, in terms of thresholds, and so I don't know if there is any thresholds for those three things.
Thank you.
All right, so it is that there are a number of things being put in place in the background now to facilitate the law coming into effect with the procurement regulation. I know that the Office of the Procurement Regulator has been doing training with a number of those suppliers who need to understand how they will register and be part of a centralized database, you know, which pre-qualifies persons who will now want to provide service to the public sector. So I wondered if anyone would have any issues or concerns with respect to those who are in procurement now and know that the way in which you government will get your suppliers to provide goods or services to the ministry or the state agency. Are there any concerns that you would have with respect to transparency or integrity issues that you may want guidance from Afra Raymond to deal with? So anyone? All right. So while personal thinking through, I want to deal with an issue, Afra, that you may
Yes.
not be able to provide a solution, but it would be useful to have your advice.
Right, right.
And this is when it is the procurement specialists themselves who have chosen to engage in wrongdoing.
Tell Ruth to turn on the light in his office, please. Yeah, hold on a second.
Yes.
Ask her to turn this light on. Yes, Kamala, go ahead. Yeah.
So when we have the procurement officers within the government ministries themselves who engage in wrongdoing, that's a question that has not yet been addressed. Sometimes it may be because it's easy, there's safety in numbers because there's no accountability on any one individual.
Sure.
You know, or it may be because it's easy to hide behind the fact that so long as you have the signature of the permanent secretary or someone who is more senior, then it moves responsibility off of you.
Yeah.
So how can we deal with issues like that? And then I see that Kay Baldev Singh Arjun has her hand up, so we'll ask Kay to also ask her question as well, and then we'll have you respond.
Yes. Okay. Good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon. I actually wanted to just go back to the lobbying thing.
Yes, at the beginning.
In the last 20 years or so, there was such a strong lobby from the private sector, from the TTCA, the JCC,
Yes.
chamber, everybody,
Yes.
to get this legislation passed.
Yes,
And I
it
don't know
was.
if I've missed things in the press over the last day or so, but what has happened to that lobby? That's my
Well,
question.
I would need to say to you that I had a major falling out with JCC, which led to my resignation at the end of 2015. My erstwhile colleague, Dr. Jim Armstrong, became president of JCC for the next 5 years. Jim just left. I think he left last year, around the middle of last year. And his presidency was a very quiet one. He didn't make any, the JCC became a very quiet organization. I can't comment about why that was, because the way the situation was so hard, I was not at the table, okay? But all I can tell you as a matter of fact is that the organization went silent. And the JCC had occupied a leading role in the fight for procurement law. So you're quite correct, Kay, in making the point that you're making. It's a very astute observation. But the reasons as to why JCC did it, I don't know what it is. I don't know what that reason is. I could say that without fear of contradiction, I could say this is a matter of the first importance. Okay? I could say this is a matter that needs our collective attention. It got this far. We got this far in terms of writing the law, getting the law passed by Parliament, having a procurement office appointed, staffed and funded. The regulations agreed. We got this far because of collective action, and we're going to finish this because of collective action. So that is, I would close off on that. That's how I would respond to you. Okay, I can't speculate about why JCC didn't do what they did. You know, I don't know what the reason is. You know.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, so you have the floor for another 5 to 10 minutes, Afra, and I want you to make an appeal to our procurement specialists who work in the public sector now. Because as much as we could talk about what happens externally and the lobbying to ensure that there may be regulations in place so that we can see better performance in the public sector, there is a role to play for those who are on the inside.
Yeah, well, I want to say that as I said, there's a responsibility for us all in terms of where we're going. We have developed to a fine science the art of knowing and not knowing. It's almost a Zen thing. We know and we don't know. So in fact, we have developed a society that's quite educated in that we are all very well lettered, and you could put Trinidadians and Tobagonians anywhere in the world to do any exam, and they will do the country proud. They will do us proud, young and old. It doesn't matter about race or whether they're from country or they're from town. They will do the country proud. We are bright people. We absorb. We can pick up on things fast and so on. Yet when you try to have discussions, and it's part of the, you know, when we were growing up as children, we heard stories about Anansi. And of course, Anansi is this mythical West African spider who survives by his wits and by his lying and his double dealing. And Anansi was a necessary part of our history. And Anansi was necessary for us to survive the Middle Passage and slavery and some of the bitter pieces of colonialism. And the real question is do we need Anansi anymore now that we're independent? Is Anansi a healthy part of our republic? Is Anansi a healthy part of our country? We know Anansi is a part of we. We have to interrogate ourselves and ask whether Anansi is a healthy part of us. Because really, for all of the education we have and all the exams we pass and so, you'd be surprised to know, as somebody who seeks after detailed information on projects and on proposals and so, you'd be surprised to know how many people greet my thing with hostility. So why you want to know that? Why you asking that? You still asking about that? The actual conceptual foundation of all of this is that this is our country. This is our country. Okay? It all belongs to us. This is not an attempt of mine to abrogate the right of private property. Of course not, I'm in the property industry. But it's our country. We build this city. People looking like us, we build this country. Okay? And this is our country. We have every right to know. Nobody should have a second to be asking us why we want to know this or why we want to know that. Okay? All of those agencies and all of you in the public agencies, whether the public agency is WASA or TNTech or the Ministry of this or the police service, whatever the public agency, all of you are engaged in serving the public interest within different mandates and policies, whether it's a policy for inoculation or policy for drainage or policy for school books. Those are different policies that are parts of the thing. You're all engaged in serving the public interest. Okay? And I would urge us to keep an eye on those higher visions, because I am telling you, if you think back, I'd like to read out a history and think about what our foreparents passed through 100 years ago, 75 years ago, 125 years ago. The stupidness they had to put up with, the humiliation, the sacrifice, the brutality to get us here. If some of them could come back, you know, some of us believe in these little things like zombies, and we make no joke about Anansi and things. They'll come back and sit down like a fly on the wall and see some of the stupidness we are engaged in now. Their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren that they sacrifice for us to be able to go to school and get a better opportunity, and see some of the stupidness we are involved in now and dishonesty, they would spin around in their grave. So we had better understand where we have come from and have a conscious, positive, constant thing to do better. That's my closing words, Kamala. I don't want to sound too much like anybody like you know. I'll leave it like that for now.
Yes, thank you very much, Afra. I think that you said it well when you spoke about our Anansi history and where do we want to relegate Anansi in our daily life. You know, is going to be the mascot. Is this how we are going to move forward? I love that, how you have presented it to us. Because at the end of the day, it's a question that's also presented to the CCGI very often, you know. Are we sure that persons want to change? Are we sure that good governance is where we want to go? Or is that just the belief of one or two individuals and that's been imposed on others? So if we are looking to improve procurement practices in the country, then we need to know that this is something that, you know, everyone shares, and that the way in which we are going to engage moving forward is going to change from how it has been in the past, or else, as Einstein says, you know, you can't do the same thing and expect a different result. But we also understand that it takes courage to do things differently. And we have persons like Afra Raymond. We have many examples in Trinidad and Tobago of persons who are willing to stand up and provide that support and, you know, encourage what should be the building of not just a better country here in Trinidad and Tobago, because remember, we are part of a region. We are part of a people who are so capable, you know, that has been on the world stage many times and can, in fact, contribute to change in the world. But that's a decision that we have to make and intentionally go there. I'd rather be than being tossed around by the storms of whatever is happening on the outside.
Yes.
So thank you, Afra, so much for a great session, for your candid talk with us. We at the CCGI really appreciate that kind of support, and we look forward to being able to host you again in the future.
Thank you.
As we join, because as you say, you know, it takes all of us together, that lobbying effort.
Of course, yeah.
Yes, to help bring about, the change that we want. So thank you so much. So to our participants, we are moving after this to our final session for today to end off our part 3 in the Governance in Public Sector series. I think we have ended at a really good place to introduce the next session, when our regulator himself has to address these issues of, so if persons are going to choose to do things differently, how can you be protected? How can you be given that support to ensure that you don't feel victimized? Or, as was stated very bluntly by one of the participants very early in the chat, how do you continue to live? It's a very thought-provoking question, and we need to address it. All right, so thank you guys. Make sure to join us using the next link, because we close off the room at this point. Thank you for staying with us so far today, and I know that the last session is going to really bring it to us. All right, thank you all very much. Thank you for the great feedback.
Okay, thanks.